The following is an interview with Father T.J. Martinez, S.J. Father Martinez entered the Society of Jesus in 1996, spent 3 years teaching at Jesuit College Prep in Dallas as part of his training, and was ordained a priest in 2007. He then went on to establish Cristo Jesuit College Preparatory School in Houston. In March of this year, Father Martinez was diagnosed with terminal gastric cancer. He now joins me from St. Louis. So, of course, what has brought this whole conversation about is the case of Brittany Maynard, who has been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer and has decided to end her life before she enters into the more difficult stages of suffering and decline. This has, of course, raised a lot of passion in people in America since she came out with this. And there have been a lot of fights, for and against, and a lot of passion again. But then there have been a lot of people who are sort of dispassionate about it, right? Their response to what she has chosen to do is to say, well, I'm not going to judge her, or this really isn't any of my business. And so their position is one of really not taking a position except to let her do what she wants. So I guess my first question is about why we should be passionate about this. Why take a stand about this at all? Why does it matter?
I certainly have heard many of the things that you have said, and that really it's an individual issue. It's a personal issue. It's an autonomous issue. It's an issue that only deals with her, that doesn't necessarily deal with the rest of society or the rest of individuals. And that's what many times our culture pushes, the autonomous self, what we would call, or the independent, self-defining individual, where ego is at the center, not necessarily in terms of I'm better than anybody else, but I can make decisions on my own for myself, and I have no connection, or there are no repercussions, or there's no nothing I have to answer for in terms of that. Underlying my belief is a very different belief about who we are as individuals, and a belief about who we are as human beings. And I should speak truth to violence when it comes to that. And I think the truth is that our lives are not our own. Up and against what maybe popular culture says, we are gifts. We're my own life is a gift. I don't own it. I didn't create it. I certainly have not all this control that I think I have over it, or that other people think I have over it, and that this autonomous self is a little bit of a straw man or a straw woman that we created so that we can have the illusion of control over our own lives. And quite frankly, it goes against the idea that we are gifts from God. We belong to God. We fall in line with God, according as St. Ignatius constantly says about his Jesuits and those who are taught by Jesuits, so that we can follow his will for our life. And ultimately, we give ourselves at the end as gift to God. So I move away, and I think intentionally so, from the idea of this autonomous, independent, totally isolated self, because I don't believe it's true.
I've watched Brittany Maynard's video where that she's posted on her site, where she advocates for this right for states and for people. And it seems to me that I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here, but she also seems to have a sense of life as a gift. She talks about her passion for travel, her passion for the outdoors, her passion for her family, her passion for her husband. She does seem to really kind of relish and value life. Suffering seems like a different thing, though, doesn't it? Because suffering doesn't feel like a gift, either to yourself or to the people around you who love you, who have to watch this suffering. Coming back to what you said before, is this a gift? Is suffering and decline a gift, or is it is Brittany maybe doing the right thing and saying, you know what, my life is a gift and I want to remember it as such?
Jay, excellent question. And I would imagine that most people, or a lot of people in the world, believe, as again, Brittany might believe in that, the gift is the happy moments, the joyful moments, the good moments, et cetera, et cetera. And that there is no gift in terms of pain and suffering. Well, I guess here again, I think that's wrong. Again, not just because I'm Catholic, but I think this is a human comment that I'm making, a humanitarian comment I'm making. I do not think at all that God causes suffering. I do think that suffering is part of who we are. I love that book, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People, by a Jewish rabbi. Incredible, thought-provoking book. Comes after, I think, the Holocaust, and of course, the great suffering that 6 million plus Jews, among others, went through. And the big question certainly is that, what is it suffering? The Jewish question, which I think is the Catholic question, which I think is the right question, is not why do we suffer? It is, where is God in the suffering? That is the right question that we should be asking. And in asking that question, suffering becomes a statement of meaning and a statement of worth, a statement of gift. So really what I'm doing is redefining the concept of gift to include suffering as part of it, understanding, as I look back at the life of Christ, who is the model, not just for Catholics, but of all human beings, who is the model of a redeemed suffering. I look at to my own suffering, the suffering of the world. Again, not that God causes it, not that any of us wants it, but the fact that it is part of our life, then that means somehow, some way, I have this belief that there's something redemptive about what I'm going through, what other people are going through, and that the suffering somehow, some way shares in the suffering of Christ. And because we share in the suffering of Christ, there is something salvific happening in the suffering. So I think what's happening is culture has moved away, has taken apart suffering and salvation to such an extent that people no longer see it as worthy or as redemptive or as necessary part of being human beings. And maybe I want to try to push these two back together, not only because I believe it, but because my faith informs it and because it is real.
But I think that a lot of people who hear the positions like you've just articulated would say, that's all fine and well because you are Catholic, because you believe that you need to be saved or that humanity needs to be saved, that a salvific anything has meaning and purpose, that the world is in need of being saved, or that people are in need of being saved, or that Christ had any significance beyond being a great guy who was also a very good moral teacher. But the fact is that a lot of people don't feel that way. They don't believe in Christ, or they don't feel that they need saving. So in a place like a state within the United States, or at the federal level, given that there's so many diverse opinions, is it better to let people make their own choice, to have the right to do something like this, given that we have different opinions about God and our goals and ends, and whether we need to be saved or not? And how would you respond to somebody who proposed that?
I think it's a good question. It's a very American question, right? And it's certainly the debate between rights and responsibilities, and what role government should have and what role government should not have. Certainly, there's also the wonderful issue of separation of church and state. As a lawyer, I get that. As a Jesuit, I get that. I still believe, in a kind of a core part of my heart that the state has not only a legal responsibility but a moral responsibility as well. And maybe that's old-fashioned, and maybe that's reading too much theology into political science, whatever you would like to call it. But I think life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's something that we were founded on, where life is the first thing that's mentioned in that very thing, and that the state has a moral responsibility to protect life, even when culture might not agree. That the state has an interest, as they would say legally. The state has a viable interest in protecting the life of its citizens, and so I do believe that interest should be used on both the state and federal level, and that there is a need to do so, probably more than we're doing right now.
So, would you say, and of course with humility, as you are a humble man, would you say that Brittany Maynard is missing out on something by choosing to end her life early?
So I'm quite proud of my humility. So
There's a good Jesuit.
Jesuit, as a good lawyer, as a good Jesuit, as a good founder of a Jesuit high school. Proud of my humility. I mean, the quick answer is yes, right? And I'm reading this book on the events of 9/11. An age of terror in America, an age of suffering, an age of pain, and an age of violence. All of that there. Well, I mean, what the commentary is that immediately following an age of suffering is an age of reverence. Something happened after that horrific event. Not that anyone in the world in their right mind would want something like that to happen. But it happened, and something followed, and it was an age of reverence, is what they call. Somehow, because of 9/11, we revere each other a little bit more. The country is a little bit more united. We revere our rights and our responsibilities. We revere our children. I saw this in a very small way when I got to Houston to start Cristo Rey. Within 2 weeks of buying a property so that we could start the school, it was hit by Hurricane Ike. And 2 weeks after that, we were out of power. Minor suffering compared to 9/11. But what was so fascinating is, in the minor event of suffering, people started to pay attention a little bit more to what's going on to their neighbor. People started talking to each other. People started inviting other people to each other. People were sharing their food with each other. People were treating each other as people, the dignified people that God instilled in us from the beginning. And so is to your question again, is Brittany missing out? I think so. Why? Because suffering ultimately is transformed and turned into reverence, an ability to love one another a little bit more because of the suffering, and an ability certainly to love God a little bit more because of the suffering. And I certainly see it in my situation. I mean, thousands of people have sent letters, emails, to pray for my health. The community at Cristo Rey has never been tighter. The supporters of Cristo Rey have never been more generous. There is something happening because of what I'm going through, where the kids at Cristo Rey will benefit. So yeah, you do. If you're going to cut yourself off from the suffering and pain, you also cut yourself off from the reverencing and the community building and bonding and faith escalating moments that happen in the most, and only happen in the most difficult times that we go through.
You've been talking a lot about God, and I can certainly understand why. But to get specific, and if I may get a little more personal in your own experience, how has your experience of suffering, or has your experience of suffering changed how you see God? And has it ever caused difficult moments in your own journey of faith?
Yeah. I was in shock for a long time when they came down with the diagnosis. Always been a guy who been love working out, always running. Guy who gets up at 4 in the morning so he could go work out, so that he could be work at 6, so he could work till whatever 7 o'clock. So then you can jump and have dinner with some people who support Cristo Rey. Finally get to bed. Maybe about 11:30, up at 4 again, and loving it. And then all of a sudden, this hits in a random way. And I think for a long time, there's a little bit of disbelief. 44 years old. This is a type of cancer that strikes men who are above 80. I think number one, it has made me a lot more sensitive to other people who are suffering, and realizing, there is an unfairness about the whole thing. But at the same time, that unfairness does not necessarily challenge my absolute faith and love for God, because things can be unfair and I can still be in love with God at the same time. Again, I don't have the belief that he is the cause. I do have the belief that he has meaning behind it. And I do have the belief that there's a bigger picture going on than I can even see. And that somehow, some way, he's going to take my suffering, Father Fitzgerald's suffering, the suffering of the world, and somehow use it in a way, not that he causes it, but use it in a way that becomes a saving moment for not only us as humanity, but for others, individuals as well. And so given that I believe that, my love for God has not changed. Are there more questions? Most definitely. Are there harder days and easier days? Easily. It is very difficult to watch my own ability to eat shrink down to almost nothing. And at the same time, as I'm praying, as I'm doing my examination of consciousness, as I'm doing my examination of conscience, as I'm going through the office, as I'm there at Mass, because of everything that I'm going through, all of those amazing moments are more pregnant and poignant than ever, because I am living minute to minute these days, not from 5-year strategic planning to 5-year strategic planning as I used to live. It's minute to minute, and therefore God is much more readily available and much more present to me, because I am much more present to him in that moment. So yeah, there's a lot more questions. At the same time, I have the redemptive part of the suffering, and in a very small way, that redemptive or that reverencing part is that I am a much more attentive to the God of the here and now. And that becomes a powerful moment for me in prayer, and certainly deepens my relationship with Christ.
We've covered a lot of ground. We've gotten through the major questions that people have had. So my question to you is, well, I think this could be a very good place to wrap up, but I wanted to ask you if you had anything else that you wanted to cover, or for me to pose a question to you about.
Oh gosh, I think you covered all the good questions. I think this is a very timely topic. I think it's also a timeless topic at the same time. There is a bigger picture which none of us has a right to see or can even understand. And this is tough not only on me. I think it's actually tougher on other people and less on me, because it's very hard to watch somebody suffer. I think that's harder than suffering. But as I always tell them, the story's going to end well. Wherever my story ends, it's part of a bigger story, and the story is going to end well. And I forget where I got it from, but it's always been in my mind, and I saw it even recently. The fact that God has the bigger picture, God has a bigger story, and I love God enough to to know that that picture was going to win at the end. And so if the story is not going well, that means it's not the end. So the story will end well. My story, your story, our story is going to end well.